Duckies and Dice Fiends. Welcome to Chaotic Wholesome Presents. It is time for the Table Talk Show. I am Kay, and I'm one of your co-hosts. I am being harassed by Gilmore, so he will probably show up in the early part of this. As I said, hey, Dungeon Mr. Ty, welcome on in. But I'm only one of your co-hosts. Our third co-host is Gilmore. Say hi, Gil. Say hi, Gilmore. And David, who the heck is you? And what the heck is we doing here?
Hi, I'm David, and this is the Chaotic Alpaca Presents show where we talk about things. But no, this is the Chaotic Wholesome Presents Tuesday Table Talk Show featuring Gilmore. And I count my lucky stars that Kay has not forced me as well into a bow tie, where every week we talk about TTRPG stuff. How to be a better player, how to be a better GM, how to be a better human being, all with a focus on intersectionality and inclusion so that everybody can have a good time.
Look at you. Flawless.
Right? It's crazy.
Right? Impressive. So yes, you can find us here doing this every Tuesday. Tomorrow you can find me over at Tavernaw's channel, not Tavernaw, at Goblin Cave TV playing the circus game with my My Little Pony tiefling. Thursday, I'll be right back here playing, what's it called? Coral Island. It's a new farming game. Also, David, it's on Game Pass.
David subtly types it to his computer.
Hey, Rex, how you doing? Are you doing more Disco Elysium?
While there will be a return to Slay the Princess, this Friday will be dedicated to Disco Elysium.
All right.
Because I did not realize how much the detective in that was a gigantic piece of shit, and I can't wait to just set him on fire. Like,
Hello,
I will find
Eric.
some way to sabotage his ship.
Welcome on in. Sunday, that's when I will be over at Tavernaw's channel, hopefully playing Kinley and Girl by Moonlight. Speaking of, we're going to talk about, I don't know if you know, David, I'm chronically online, and there's been some discourse lately.
I would have never expected you, of all people, to be chronically online.
I know, it's only like it's been my profession to be online chronically for 15 years. You know.
Right.
Yes, there has been some talk, and it's been interesting because your friend is a community manager, and so they put on the hazmat suit and waded into the comments.
Yeah, that's always just you always do that on purpose, and ooh-wee.
I do know what I'm getting myself to do. Again, I am the tank. Community managers, in case y'all don't know this, community managers are the team tank. We will take the hits for you. We will tell you the important things. Just don't go, if you're a developer, if you're whatever you do, don't read the comments. Let me tank that for you. So there's been some discussion around bleed. And there's been some very interesting takes on all sides. Like, I want to say both sides, just all sides, in all directions, in all which way. Some takes of which, my hair's doing something really weird. Some takes of which
Me too.
were really surprising to me. So I want to talk about that. But first, I think we need to level set, right? So David, do you have a definition of bleed?
Bleed is the transference of emotions from your character to you and vice versa.
And yes, bleed really is as simple as that. Now, this discussion started because a certain TTRPG, which is often in the darker, spicier side of things, we'll say, put out a 2-page spread on how to play for bleed. And a lot of people were understandably, especially with a darker, spicier game, that can be dangerous, especially people speaking up were people who had legitimate experiences of being stalked or harassed because and through people they played that game with. Like that game in particular. So there was a lot of bleed is bad, you shouldn't encourage it. There is also another camp which says bleed is bad and you shouldn't encourage it, and that tends to be the very, very old school D&D people. The 1 and 2 were the best versions ever. The 5e isn't real D&D, and anyone who's cosplaying or doing character stuff is corrupting the game. That tends to be another group of bleed is bad.
The rock up with a shoebox full of character sheets, and you'll get to the bottom of it before some time has passed.
And hey, Vivian, welcome on in. We just got started. So the stance that I'm going to take, and we're going to talk a lot more about bleed and what it is on a little bit more of, there's levels to it, but first thing I'm going to say is, and this will be spicy for some people, I do not consider bleed to be bad. In fact, I consider it very natural to a point. And while I don't think bleed is inherently bad, I do think it is a bad idea to publish 2 pages on how to play for bleed without any talk about consent, safety, guardrails, or self-care after you have dealt with a very intense case of character bleed. Which is, again, something that is often not discussed in these groups and why certain things happen. But much like safety tools, people who are emotionally healthy are equipped to deal with it, and those who are not tend to hate it.
I keep thinking about Vampire the Masquerade because Vampire deals with some very dark themes, and it has some dark gameplay elements. Vampires are essentially ostensibly evil. Like, they are otherworldly creatures that prey on humanity. And the ways in which they prey on humanity aren't just we are livestock for them, but there is a lot of seduction and coercion and manipulation and all these things that in real life are really icky. Things that are red flags in people immediately. And there is a thin line between and also deals with themes of like mind control and loss of will and so consent becomes this thing that you push through and push past, which in real life is bad, full stop, every time. And so, and like, you could make that argument with other TTRPGs, like, everybody has heard of the band of murder hobos that just stab everybody they don't like. Yeah. There are people who do that in real life.
Curse of Strahd.
Right. But Vampire, those elements are very much closer to real life because your average person doesn't go around with 3 or 4 of their best friends just beating up on the populace.
Yeah, armed to the teeth, threatening every 7-Eleven worker.
Right. And if you do that, hopefully you don't get to do that for long.
Yes.
But we're not going to talk about law enforcement today. And so with all those themes and getting to indulge in the darker side of humanity, into the more objectively evil things that people can and do, but doing it under the guise of fiction it's very tricky ground. Hi, JD. Because you could be a good person who's like dabbling your foot in this and having a good time with it, or you could be the sort of person who does these things in real life and utilizes vampire to do that to other people, to sharpen your skills. There are a lot of different. It's one of those things where it's like it's fun, but it can go real bad real quickly.
Yes.
It's like playing with firearms.
Yeah.
Like there are more safety tools that you should be utilizing when quote unquote playing with firearms, and you should always respect how dangerous they are. But then there's going to be a subset of people who don't use those safety tools, who don't respect how dangerous they are, and then they shoot themselves in the foot cleaning the thing.
Right. And okay, let's be very clear. I'm going to say this up front, and David will confirm. I experience character bleed all the time. All the time. And I don't think it is a bad thing. Now, I'm going to say, I want to talk a little bit because we have these two really anti-bleed stances for two very different reasons in D&D. I consider one more legitimate than the others. The other, that's another conversation. But I want to talk about bleed outside of the TTRPG space. And several performers and actors who are also TTRPG people have spoken to this very well on Twitter through, multi-comment things. But in theater, you are expected to bleed. You are expected to take your experience and put it into that character. That is a normal it's not even a normal thing. It is an expectation. You are straight up told, if you cannot figure out how to put your own experiences into this character, then you are doing it wrong. Or you will not be truly successful. I'm gonna say something here that is gonna be surprising, David. A little known fact about Baby K is Baby K was not a theater kid.
If you put a gun to my head and were like, all right, Baby K, gave me like a whole list of questions, and then like the last question was Baby K a theater kid? And it's like, if you get it wrong, the gun goes off, then I would have an additional hole in my head.
Baby K wanted to be a theater kid, but the theater teacher at Baby K school hated Baby K. But Baby K was not allowed to be a theater kid. So Baby K learned all the theater tricks from reading books and watching. I mean, I don't know how I'm sure there were other ways I picked it up, because watching YouTube videos was not a thing because YouTube didn't exist yet. But yeah, Baby K was not a theater kid. Baby K wanted to be a theater kid. Baby K tried to learn all the things theater kids were doing. So for not being a theater kid, I am very theater kid.
There were a lot of adults in your life as a child, as a child and young adult, who were just wrong. Like,
I was also a jerk who put that, they literally wouldn't let me join. Like, senior year, you had to be approved to be in drama. I was not approved to be in drama. So they did like a talent show, and I wrote a 1-person performance and like did it in the talent show, and everyone was up the drama teacher's derriere about why is this person not in theater. So, baby K got theirs.
Good.
But I cannot, David has seen the backstories of not all, but many of my characters. I cannot imagine writing a character and not bleed. Like, I have bled into characters before I have played them, just while I'm writing the backstory, before I even realized. If we look at Soul from the Emergency Power podcast, I was like, this is a messy bitch. This character is messy. Like, some genuinely bad stuff happened to them, but they handled it in the worst, most ridiculous ways. Haha, isn't this a ridiculous way to react and to deal with this kind of pain and trauma? They should do better. And then I lost a family member. And guess what Kay caught themselves doing in reaction to that grief? Exactly, to a lesser degree, right? Tone down, but going from an 11 to a 6, the exact same kind of reactions that they were laughing at in this character. Oops. But part of what we want to discuss is bleeding can actually help you know yourself and grow. And that, knowing that this thing that came out of my mind is capable of doing this, which means I am capable of doing this, helped me go, maybe I don't do that. And that was a level of self-awareness I would not have had if I did not bleed into my TTRPG characters.
It's funny because very early on when we were working on things, Kay is like, hey, I'm building this character. And then Kay would hand me the stack of documentation. And I'd be like, this is Kay. And then I'd be like, this you? And then Kay'd be like, it's not me. And I'm like, Kay. And then 2 months would go by. And then Kay would be like, hey, remember that thing I sent you? I'd be like, And Kay's like, this me. And I'm like, oh. So when I said this you? And Kay's like, yeah, it was absolutely me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really good and really important. And I recognize not just with people that are that I've known in the past couple of years in the TTRPG space, but even back in high school, one of the the DM of my first D&D game, how he came out to other people besides me, because myself and another player knew, but the other players didn't know, and the rest of the school didn't know. And one of the kids was a blabbermouth, so he knew when he came out that everybody was going to know.
That was it, yeah.
And it was messy and it was sloppy, and I'm not going to go into the detail of how it happened, but that's how he came out, is by introducing a character in the game that was gay, and then one of the other kids going, hey, that person's gay, why did you put a gay here? And he's like, because I love gay people. Well, why? He's like, because I look in the mirror, and through that person figured out, if not that he was bi, at least that there was a question mark there. And that led to a lot of growth for our little 15, 16-year-old brains. And I've talked to people over the years who are like, hey, the whole non-binary thing. Hey, the fact that I'm trans. Whether it be TTRPGs or playing a character in an MMO, or other different types of interactive media, they've been able to go, oh, I've been able to dip a toe into this different aspect and discovered that this was a different aspect of me.
And yes, the TTRPGs can be a very, very safe way to try that out, to try on new identities, to try choices. We have joked on here several times, and we joke in like the haha, it's funny because it's so accurate, not because like, yeah, people do this. Let me be very clear in case you are new here and don't know us. We joke about how you realize that you are trans or non-binary by trying out your new name, either in your TTRPG or in your Stardew Valley file.
Yeah.
Just to see how it feels, right? Is this, does this, this kind of, or nope, you know what? That doesn't, nope, new save file, start over. Now, I would like to say the other side of that coin. Before we do, David, if someone comes to you, someone who has decent talent, right? Someone who you know is intelligent and talented, comes to you and says, David, I want to write a book. What should I write about? What's the first thing you say? What's the first piece of advice?
Pronoundressingroom.com. Gonna add that onto my list of things to check out.
Right? Thank you, Ribbonanza.
So my caveat is, am I giving them professional advice or am I giving them personal advice?
Okay, the typical answer to that question is write what you know.
Right. The typical answer is write what you know, and I never, ever, 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 ever tell people that. And there's a reason why. Because when it comes to writing a book, making a TTRPG, like Kay and I, like, we don't know about like spiders crawling in our mouths, or at least I don't. Whatever shit you got up to in Texas, I will not comment on.
Scorpions up the leg and spiders in the mouth are two different things, David.
They are two very different things, both of which I have no experience of, and I hopefully never will. And thank you for the resub.
Thank you, Mallory.
So
you are not at all late. We are so happy you're here.
I tell people, if you have something to say, and the story format is what you, then go for it. Then sit down and write it.
Hello, DC. Welcome on in.
And there's this, and I know this is sort of like getting a smidge off topic, but here we go. There's this old chestnut that people talk about where they're like, oh, well, you could tell what somebody really thinks and tell what somebody's really about by reading the things they write. And for some authors, that's true. Like, you want to know what Orson Scott Card thinks? Sit down and read the Ender series. Because you'll get to the end of it and you'll be like, oh, this guy's a Mormon. And guess what? He's a Mormon. But I don't think that you very obviously put yourself into the things that you write. I do think that you can pick and choose what things you reveal about yourself. Ender's Game was, look, that's a whole rant that we're not gonna.
The repressed Mormon thing. That's a whole.
And yes, Ender's Game was very gay. Ooh-wee. But I do think that you are never going to avoid writing about the things that are important to you. Like writing a book, or even like a short story, or even like fan fiction, is a Herculean effort. And so you got to really care if you're going to sit down and write, 80,000 words, 120,000 words about literally anything. And so like the mathematician who sits down and like publishes 3 papers about like the number 0, or about some like a weird equation, they really care about it, ask them about it, and they will talk to you about it. Like they really.
Yes. But with that said, if you are a straight white Midwestern man, please do not make your first book about being a Black trans woman. Don't write that book. That's you do not know that experience, no matter how good your imagination is. Please don't do it. Please don't do it.
Yeah, and going back to write what you know, there, as much as I say, write what you want to write about, also write what you can write about.
Yeah.
Because there are so many lived experiences that I don't know about or have. And there's a big difference between sort of like intellectually exploring someone else's lived experience based off of what I know via something I sit down and write versus whipping up a character like you won't ever catch me playing like an Asian lady monk from the Far East. Like you won't ever catch me playing like someone from like South India, because those experiences are so different from my own. I can't communicate them to an audience in an honest way.
Right. And again, kind of bringing it back to the topic is, well, bleed can be problematic in cases. Having the correct kind of bleed, having the experience to bleed your own experience, your own knowledge of a situation, your own pain or joy into a character that you're writing, be it for a book or be it for a background to bring into a TTRPG, that bleed is very, very useful because it makes that character more genuine and more human, which makes them more rounded and more interesting. And I will say that with a period at the end. Like, I'm sorry. More rounded, more depth, well thought out characters are more interesting.
Absolutely.
So, with that said, I want to throw up some caveats here, which is there is, especially among a certain small, or not so small, I'm not going to say, segment of the TTRPG community, people who bleed in two really problematic ways. The first is something we like to call trauma dumping. TTRPGs and therapy are an incredible combination. If you can hit that magical combination of I play TTRPGs and I go to therapy, life is really great. It is magical. There are people who try to use TTRPGs in place of therapy, and that's a problem. The people that you play with are not therapists, and even if someone you play with is a therapist, they are not your therapist, and certainly not in that moment. There is lots to be said about mental health in TTRPGs. There's lots of that. Yes, all of us end up eventually using our characters on purpose or accidentally to work through some of our trauma, some of our pain. This is something that happens if you're playing, especially the more performance-based TTRPGs. But look, I know so many people who are like, I had a bad day and I just want to do combat today because I want to punch monsters. I've had a bad day. And that right there is a form of bleed. Maybe it's not, I'm feeling what my character's feeling, but it's like, you know what? I've had a bad day. I can't punch a dragon, so I want my character to go punch a dragon so I can feel better. That's bleed. And people tend to forget that that is also bleed. But don't trauma dump your fellow players. You can and should have the emotional awareness to go, hey, I am feeling this scene a little too much. I'm gonna pull out those safety tools and say, can we either take a break or can we skip to the next scene? Because if we continue down this, I'm not gonna be okay as a player, and I'm gonna take it out on you all. Don't do that. We've had it happen. I don't know if you've had it happen at a table, David. I've definitely had it happen to a table where I'm just like, I know what's happening and I cannot help or make this better at all.
The number of times that someone has the number of times someone has like tried to, not even like, the number of times someone has had something that they really needed to unpack and either didn't know that they needed to unpack it or tried to haphazardly unpack it all over everyone else.
Yes. Yeah,
Too
JD
many
says,
times.
imagine if you're in IT and you are asked every D&D session to fix someone's laptop.
Listen, anybody who knows anything about a computer, like if you know how to check your email, and if you are like a late Gen Xer on down, you have been asked to tech support a boomer's computer. Yeah, it fell. You've been asked to tech support a boomer's computer relentlessly, and there's at least one boomer in your life where every time you see them, they have a computer issue, and it's like, come on, meow. Yes.
This is the reason my mom has Macs. I don't know how to work a Mac, so I cannot troubleshoot her Mac. And yes, I did pick up that metaphor. I'm sorry if I didn't say it correctly, but yes, it's a very good, it's a very apt metaphor. Like, as JD said, like, absolutely, I'm happy to help you, but not every session. The other side of Bleed, which is, most of y'all know, I'm ace. I'm pretty loud and open about this fact. That I am both asexual and aromantic. I have no desire for any of that. Allosexuals are weird and wonderful, and I'm so happy for you. Please don't involve me in it. My sexuality is, please don't show me yours, and I won't show you mine, and life is good.
But Kay, what if we want to see yours?
Sucks
Holds
to be
up
you.
blank piece of paper. Here it is.
Exactly.
There you go.
And I've had this conversation with a couple different aces. I know exactly one ace who's hanging out in the chat. I won't out you if you don't want to be. I know exactly one ace who doesn't read or at least have an interest in smutty fanfic or shipping. Every other asexual that I know, and at this point I'm collecting them like Pokemon, loves either boy love manga or the fanfic, or they're an aggressive shipper of something or other. Like, it is a thing. We've discussed it because one of my friends was like, this perplexes me as to why I am like this, as is every other ace I know, which the answer I think is, this is my theory, which so far aces agree with me generally. Romance, lust, and love to us is as much a fantasy as casting magic or fighting a dragon. We want to play around with it in fantasy because it's weird and we can't imagine it being real.
Zoinks, Scoob.
I love doing romance in TTRPGs. I love it. I love shipping characters. I love having my characters shipped. I love doing like the, ooh, are we, aren't we? I love coming in with characters who are a couple or who are exes, because that's really funny. I love that. I will not do romance with someone whom I do not know, and I do not know well, because I am very aware of the fallout that happens, because I have experienced it, even in my relatively short time in TTRPGs.
I had something to say, but then Ribbon's comment, the farthest I want to see is holding hands, that's lewd enough, really sabotaged me. But it's gone.
Yes, there is a certain breed of person, and many of them play TTRPGs, who are like, oh, we're in a TTRPG together. And this generally goes one of two ways. The first way is often, I have boy parts, you look like you have girl parts, therefore our characters should be in a relationship, should be fucking. Like, you are here at this table to be girlfriend material. Which is not fun. It is not fun to just be the girlfriend character and be expected to just play second fiddle to this person, especially when you've certainly never agreed to that relationship. The second is even less fun and much of a bigger problem is there are people who are like, oh, I like your character. I like you. We like each other's. Like, my character likes your character. Your character likes my character. You say you like my character. That means we should get married tomorrow. I'm following you home.
Yikes. Yikes.
Also not fun. And as much as these people would like to say that's just no, that is a form of bleed. As well as some toxic masculinity, some misogyny, some antiquated gender role. Like, there's lots of problems there. But that too is a form of bleed. Just like, I'm really angry, can we just have combat today so I can punch something, is a form of bleed. So the definition of bleed is much broader than most people are giving it credit.
Yes, and I think one thing to circle back to is to recognize, and I've said on the channel before, Kay taught me about like the Venn diagram of gamers, and you could be a hardcore gamer and your Venn diagram doesn't touch another hardcore gamer.
David and mine.
Right. Like, we've got Stardew and like 3 other games. And
We're
like
about to have Coral Island because I'm pretty sure it's going to suck you in.
All right. But like, you know, Kay has played as much Pokemon as I've played some like she's got like my World of Warcraft level of time invested in Pokemon. And you know, I've played hundreds, if not thousands of games. Kay has played hundreds, if not thousands of games. And it's still just like, well, the overlap, like from the Super Nintendo to today, the overlap is like 3 games. And that's bananas to me. And so that really taught me that different people want different things out of games. And not everybody wants to play a video game where the game sticks your balls in a vice and then smashes them with a hammer.
Yeah.
And
David is that meme of like, I hate this game, then why are you playing it? Because I love it. And I'm like,
I have actively like been playing something, and I've been talking to a friend of mine, and I'm just every roast, every profanity, every awful thing I could say is coming out of my mouth. And she's like, have you tried playing a game where you have fun? And I was like, who does that? But it's the same thing with TTRPGs. But like TTRPGs are the same way of like, you know, different people want different things out of it. And as I play with more and more people, especially outside of the circle of people who want to perform on camera, there's some people who are like, I just want an excuse to just go and like bonk things. Like, I'm here to bonk, more bonk. And you know, there are people who treat it like a video game where it's like, I have to assail this problem and throw myself at it until I overcome it. And it's important to recognize that different people want different things, but like, let's be clear. The things we interact with have an impact on our emotional state and who we are. Mm-hmm. Like, if you sit down and read white nationalist propaganda all day, every day, if you sit down and absorb propaganda, eventually that will have an impact on how you think about things. And while you do have a choice about how you internalize those things, let's be real, the lizard brain is a thing. Like there are things that there are ways to influence the brain that we don't have conscious control over. Like if you perfect example. I went to the University of Redlands, which is one of the driest places on Earth. And so I built up static electricity every second of every day. And I worked in the computer lab, and the doors to the computer room had big metal like push bars to get in. And when I tell you I zapped myself every time for like 2 months straight. And so for the entire rest of the time I was there was always this hesitation when I reached out to like interact with the door. Like that was a conditioned response. And I would go, okay, well, I need to get in here. I'm going to get zapped. So I would reach out and like grab it. And I didn't get zapped every time, but I got zapped most times. Or like I would find a way to like discharge myself. But the point is that like, even me being conscious of it, I still flinched every time like if you've lived in Nevada, if you live in Arizona, like if you live in like places that are dry and hot, you get zappy. Yeah. And so like the things we interact with have an impact on us. The things that we like have an impact on us. And like you can watch true crime and be like, oh, this speaks to like a deep-seated fear within me, and therefore I find it fascinating. Or you can watch true crime and take notes about your next adventure. Like you can choose how you take that information and execute it in real life. But it does have an impact.
Yeah, Rex says, I just want to do a couple in a TTRPG like Gomez and Morticia, / the Thin Man movies from the 40s with two powerful people working together hand in glove. David knows I have been ranting about, and Candace knows too, because I kind of, sort of, somewhat, I don't want to say tricked, inspired Candace to do a project because I'm like, this is a story that I want, right? This kind of setting, and it's a very similar thing of like, I want this kind of setting with these kind of characters working together. That speaks to me. That excites me. There is something about that. And I don't know exactly how, but there's something about that my brain is like, I would like to experience that. I would like to play with that. And again, that is a form of bleed, right? Why you like certain video games and not other video games is the same kind of mechanism as to why, look, I'm sure we've all had this experience. I'm sure we all have the TTRPG group where you're like, yeah, I'm playing with this group. It'll be fun. And then there's the group where it's like, this Saturday, me and the other 5, right? That there's something, and that is our brains are so good. And this is especially true with storytelling, with TTRPGs in particular, because storytelling is just the most basic human thing. This is what humans did when we learned to make tools. We sat around the fire and we told stories. And we are telling stories together in TTRPGs, right? So it is very powerful, and it is very easy for our brains and our emotions to go like, yes, this matters. This is important because it is not only creativity, it is not only storytelling, it is not only wish fulfillment, it's doing it in a group with other people, which is why multiplayer video games are so impactful. Because you're doing it with other people, you are making memories together.
And it's important to recognize that if you feel emotions, you have been moved by a story. Mm-hmm. There is a franchise, there is a series of books, there is a TV series or a movie series or video game series. There is a series of anecdotes that a particular friend tells. There is something out there in the story format that speaks to you in such a way where you get big emotions from it. And if you feel emotions and then you try to tell me, oh well, there's nothing I really like care, I guarantee you I can pick one of the big franchises and be like, you know what, Boba Fett's not that cool, and then we're fist fighting on my front lawn.
Dungeon Mr. Ty says, I had a character that failed on a Wheaton level and then got made fun of for it all the time. I still feel bad for him and by extension for myself. And yes, this is the first thing I said in like episode 2 or 3 of my being in the Emergency Power podcast, because it was an existing series and I joined in and I had built this really cool, Soul's this snarky, wisecracking, catty con artist basically, and it's so fun to do it because they are highly capable. They have a sword that no one can take from them and they stab people with it very well, right? They are a highly capable person in every aspect, and I was rolling like garbage. And just the first time in a fight, they've been talking themselves up to this group the whole time, and I just can't hit anything, and I'm just like, I built this character to be so cool and they're just not right now. Like, I feel bad for them. And I feel secondhand embarrassment. And I feel guilt because it's my bad rolls that are making my character not cool. And that's a weird place to be. Guilt and secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah. And when it comes to characters you build and make and like throw into a game, I do the exact opposite that Kay does. Like, every game that anyone has played with me in the past like 5 years, we sit down at the session 0 and I go, okay, listen, this character is not me. Please do not make the mistake of thinking this is who I am as a person. Like, I play a character that is obsessed with teeth. I don't give a shit about teeth. There's nothing in my life that I am that hell-bent about.
Okay, look. Not all my characters are 100% me. Elements of them come out. Soul is aggressively pansexual. Let's just be very clear.
And that's an important thing, is like you look at Kay's characters, and there's always like one element of Kay's characters that tells on them. And the rest could be like, whatever. Like the pansexual thing.
It's very weird being ace and having a pansexual in your head.
That's awful.
It's really terrible.
But hey, no one can take Soul's sword away from them.
Except my GM that one time. And that was terrible.
Right.
I rolled back-to-back nat ones, y'all. Don't do that in Starfinder.
Yeah, don't do that. But for me, it's like putting on a pair of first new shoes and then like old worn-in shoes, where it's like I can step into and then step out of this person, this character, this experience, and I learned something about what I could be. Either good or bad. And it's also a great way to like explore social consequences with very little risk.
Yes. Enough risk that it matters, right? Because generally you care about your character.
But not enough risk whereby I get fired from my job and my whole life burns down.
Or, you're a high schooler and then suddenly the drama teacher hates you, so you can't be a drama kid.
Right. But like, with my character that's very teeth forward, it is this exploration of pushing boundaries, not invading boundaries, not with any active PCs or NPCs. But going, hey, I really want this thing for me. Hey, this is the only thing about you that matters to me. And sort of like seeing how far that could go before other characters are like, all right, we're gonna have to put knives in you. Like it's gonna be uncomfortable, but the knives go in. And that's that sort of exploration then reflects upon my personal life, because out of respect for people, I don't have any desire to do that in real life. But I see people do things like this, and I hear about them do things like this, like my entire adult life, actually my entire life. And so to sort of like live on the other side of that has been very fascinating, both in sort of like seeing my reactions reflected back at me, and also just like sort of like figuring out how they think, how they do things, has been fast. And then just being surprised at people's reactions to things, where it's like, wow, you really just gonna let this fly?
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable.
Some of them are just so clueless. They don't exactly understand what you're going for.
Right. And in a lot of ways, it's helping me like upgrade my own radar and my own safety tools, to understand where people are coming from. But when it comes to bleed, like I said, like there's no way for you to experience story without being influenced by it, invested by it. And not every story.
Right. Not every story grabs you.
But everybody has a character they love. Everybody has a franchise they love. Everybody has somebody or something that speaks to them. Like Link. Link is this adorable little twink. The complete opposite of me. Except at 5 years old, I was like, what's this guy doing with holding his thing and with the weapon? Holding his no, not holding his weapon. Holding his sword. An actual sword. A medieval sword. Link was left-handed, is what I'm saying.
We know where David's brain goes.
And I was left-handed at 5 years old. Thankfully and also regretfully, my parents trained some of that out of me. But it was the first time I was like, hey, that person on the screen shares something very important with me. And here I am, like 89 to now, however long that is, 30 something years later, being like, oh man, Link's a cool guy. I'm gonna dress him up in a mini skirt and run him around Hyrule. And like sometimes like that's all the connection you need. And like, if you know any like people of color, they're like, go ask them the first time in media that they met a character where they're like, oh man, this character, this is the first time I've seen like a black person be cool on screen. Like everybody talks about how the original like Ted Raimi, not Ted, is it Ted Raimi? But Sam Raimi. The original Sam Raimi Spider-Man was like the first comic book movie to make it so that, or like they'll talk about X-Men, about the first comic book movie to make it mainstream and make it so. Blade was the first comic book property that wasn't Superman or Batman, that proved to film studios that you could make comic book movies and people would be into them whether they knew it was a comic book movie or not. And let me tell you, there was a stretch of time where every black kid I knew, boys and girls alike, were like, yo, Blade is the coolest shit ever. And we all saw that movie too young. But ooh-wee. Link, queer icon, all kinds of queer, every kind. And like, you talk about Cloud. And like, I remember playing Final Fantasy VII and being like, ah, man, I went to Catholic school. I have a weakness for little twinks and pigtails. And like, that was it.
Yeah. No, I looked at, again, I grew up in a very, very Southern, very Bible Belt town, school, community, church, all of it. And I literally learned that gay wasn't just a mean thing you called kids on the playground because of Cloud. It's like, what's going on with Cloud and Barrett? Because I went on the date with Barrett in the Gold Saucer. I'm like, what's going on with this? Oh, okay. And then since the new game is coming out soon, I'm not going to say too much, but like then things went on and I'm like, okay, no, that was an actual read on that. Okay, cool.
And like long ago, I had issue 2 of Spawn from Todd McFarlane. And for people who don't know, the character Spawn, Al Simmons, is a black guy. Like, he's dead. He's been cooked in Hellfire and in like Earthfire. He got no skin. He wears the cool suit. But it's a black guy under there. And Todd McFarlane has spoken about Al Simmons being black for years because people have gone, well, why did you make him black? And Todd looks back at him and is like, why not?
Yeah.
He's like, I was conceiving a character, and I was a black guy who was ex-military, and I didn't think, oh man, here's a guy, let me make him black. He was just a black guy first. The end. And you know, he's said, I've like been in Texas and I've been in the South at like comic book conventions, and white guys like you know, Confederate flag, white supremacist types have come up to me and be like, oh man, Spawn is my favorite, blah blah blah, and looked him dead in the eyes, like, you know, he's a black guy, right? And then watch their smile turn to a frown and watch them walk off. And I'm like, listen, Todd McFarlane. And I am not educated enough on Todd McFarlane to know if he's done a lot of shitty things. I know that there are questions about like the Todd McFarlane Toy Company and how they've interacted with properties and vendors and yet. But Todd gets a +1 for being willing to spit in the face of some of his most dedicated fans, to stand up for the identity of his characters and the representation that character embodies.
I'm going to circle back to really quick because, you know, I looked at Cloud and I saw Cloud and Barrett with a gay story, and that was what I saw. There is a huge community which sees Cloud as a trans story, which is really, really awesome, and not what I saw when I saw it, and certainly not what... Was it Square or was it Square Enix? I think it was still Squaresoft at the time.
Yeah, still Squaresoft.
What Squaresoft intended when they wrote it, but you know what? That doesn't matter. Because knowingly or not, they wrote a story that resonates. They wrote a character arc that resonates with with trans people, with queer people. So that's a queer story.
And I do want to like piggyback on that with you can write things that resonate with people without intending to. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say you can't necessarily like look at something that somebody has written and be like, oh, I figured this person out. Because whoever writes Dragon Ball Z wrote a black dad. Piccolo is a better father to Gohan than Goku ever was. And Piccolo was all of our black dads circa like mid-90s. And I guarantee you the guy who sat down and wrote Dragon Ball Z didn't go, oh man, this is going to be everybody's favorite black daddy. Like, no, there's no way he could have conceived that. And guess what? Piccolo is one of us, and he's a dad.
Yes.
The end. I will not accept any question or any slander or any negative commentary about Daddy Piccolo.
And again, a lot of these stories, especially stories of minorities, can come across in multiple ways because look at the X-Men. They were an allegory for being black, and they were an allegory for being gay. Now it's an allegory for the LGBTQIA umbrella as a whole. There are so many similarities. People looked at, I was actually concerned after I started playing Soul. I was like, oh no, especially because, we know how tieflings are often coded. It was like, people are going to be like, oh, Kay's trying to tell like not a gay story. I tell all sorts of gay stories. Kay's trying to tell like a person of color story. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to tell like a queer trans figure out your identity story. Is very similar though. And again, when I first came up with Soul, they were very clearly, solidly non-binary in my brain. I knew that. I knew that they had some struggles with some of these things. I didn't realize how much the story was going to be a struggle of identity until I was into it. And I'm not exactly sure which way that bleed went. I'm pretty sure it went both ways. I'm pretty sure that went both ways. And that's often what happens. David and I were talking about, you want to talk about, okay, especially a certain toxic, because there are people who are concerned about bleed for genuine, honest, good, actual reasons. And then there's a group that are like, bleed is bad because it lets like people who feel things into my game. And this isn't a game where you're supposed to feel things. Like, or they're like, any kind, there are people who like to, they can't have a reasonable position. I don't know if it's engagement farming or if this is just how their brain works, but they're like, we have to push things as extreme as we can get them, right? So there are people who are like, any bleed is bad because it's fill in the blank, right? There are people who, and again, part of the reason I want to talk about this was I was reading so many comments from people being like, I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know why I was feeling this way. I am relieved that there's a name and that it's a normal thing, right? Like there are people who are like, I don't understand why playing this character makes me feel things. Because we often don't give people this language, but you want to talk about people who feel things about things that aren't real. Can we talk about Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking the BBC Sherlock. I'm not talking about Elementary. I'm talking the fans of Sherlock when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was the heck alive. So for those of you who don't know, when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was alive and writing the Sherlock books, very proper British people lost their God's damned minds. They literally did what they called the game, where they went around in real life pretending like Sherlock Holmes was real, and they were always on a lookout for mysteries to send to bake it. Like it was a whole thing. So if you've seen Sherlock BBC, where after a certain season, there's a whole thing about Watson's Warriors and like that was real. That's what people were doing in real life. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle got so sick of his own fandom and was like, you know what? I want to write something else. And he killed Sherlock. Spoiler alert for hundreds of years old. Seriously. Yeah. Killed Sherlock.
Spoiler alert for public domain.
Right. Literally public domain. Was like, nah, I'm done with this. Killed Sherlock. This is in the much more formalized, like everything was formalized. People went into mourning. They wore bands of mourning around their neck, around their arms. They dressed in all black. They went into full and proper British mourning for this fictional character. So don't tell me that this is a new phenomenon. Don't tell me that this is some weird, everyone wants to blame millennials or Gen Z. It's not any of those people coming to take over your game. This is a thing that human beings do. You cannot stop them. Doyle tried. It didn't work. Spoiler alert again, he had to bring Sherlock back to life.
Yeah, and like it is a phenomenon that soap operas.
And okay, I'm gonna make it even more controversial. The boy version of soap operas, wrestling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But near where I live, there was a big event, and I remember like driving past and seeing a long line of old women, and I'm like, what could possibly get these women in their walkers and their canes out in the sun at like 2 p.m.? What?
'Cause that's almost bedtime.
Turns out that there was a meet and greet for actors of a soap opera, and I forget which one it was. But the only time I have seen better security is when the president was around. Because apparently a lot of those women are like, you did her dirty? How dare you? How dare you knock up her twin when she was in a coma? And like wrestling, 100% the same thing. Like every 6 months or so, like if you were plugged into the wrestling world and the wrestling world news, because like there is like in character news and out of character news, and if you're plugged into the out of character side of things, which at a time I was for a lot of reasons, about every 6 months there's a crazy fan ended up like breaking down the like motel room door where so and so was staying. Someone got spotted on a flight and had to be removed. Like people are rabid, and it's like, yo, it's just I'm just playing a character. And this is where character bleed is important, because a lot of characters who play heels, who play evil characters, will like they draw lines. And I've seen like really like intense heels run into like a 7-year-old who's like a big fan of them, and then they get really chummy with the kid, and then they go back to being mean. And then I've seen heel characters be absolute dickwads to like 5-year-olds, and everyone else is like cheering because it's in character. And even I, because I hate them kids, but even I am like, yo, that's hilarious. But also, bro, that is a core memory.
Yeah.
Like that kid's gonna walk with that for the rest of their life.
That's the beginning of a supervillain arc, right?
Right. Like that might be a little over the line, bro. Like you didn't have to kick his chair out from under him. You didn't have to snatch his sign and rip it in half and give it back to him. Like, yo, this is too much. Maybe shave about 10% off of that. But that's bleed, though.
But too much.
Right. And like, could it be that like the real person under that is actually that much of a jackass? Could it be that he's too committed to the character? Who knows? But those are all examples of like bleed, because that kid is the very like definition of experiencing bleed, of how something that is like external entertainment affects your inner workings and your inner processing over the course of, you know, however long.
Yes. And yeah, so knowing like it is, again, I experience a lot of bleed. There are times I definitely play for bleed. Like David knows I can't say what because it's not out yet, but like a big thing is coming in the Emergency Power podcast, and I knew this encounter was going to happen, and it's an encounter that had been building for the entire season. It was an encounter that had been building in the back of my mind because I set it up as part of the backstory, and I knew it was coming. And it was like I was excited and nervous. I was so excited for this to happen, and I talk a lot about I do my very best to only write what the character knows. So I thought I knew how this was going to go, but also I could have been totally wrong. I left that in my GM's hands. I didn't know the motivation of the other people or peoples involved in this. So I was so excited to finally have this resolved, because we knew it was going to at least start being resolved. but I had no idea if that was going to be a good or a bad resolution. I had no idea. And I was nervous for literal weeks. For literal weeks, thinking about, it's coming, it's going to happen soon. Like butterflies in the stomach. And like, I love that. But I also very much try to keep in mind that, like, hey, I have to make sure I know where I am versus where my character is. And those can be very similar, but you do have to be able to be like, okay, you know what? I have done the thing. Yeah, yes, I am very excited for that session next week. I'm very excited. But right now, I have to focus on work. I have to be K. I have to do work right now so that I can afford internet, so that I can play that game later.
And when it comes to Bleed and the debate around Bleed, I will say this. Ultimately, you are responsible for your own mental health. And that doesn't mean that bad things can't happen to you. That means that doesn't mean that like people can't do bad things to you. But it does mean, just like your physical health, like if you get in a car accident and like, you know, they whisk you off to the ER and then they do a bunch of stuff, and then 6 months later, like, you know, you got to rehab your shoulder or you got to rehab your hip. It's up to you to do those exercises. It's up to you to go to those follow-up. It's up to you to make yourself well again. And so before we get into like the different things you can do to lean into Bleed or avoid, you know, going deeper into Bleed or any of those things, if you have had or are having a TTRPG experience that is unpleasant or detrimental to you in some shape or form, it is your responsibility to resolve that situation. It's also like everybody's responsibility to not be shitty to one another.
It is also important, if you are another player, or especially if you're the GM at the table, and you see something that might be Bleed, that might be making someone uncomfortable, it is very important that you step in, because again, sometimes Bleed can be tricky. Gaslighting is a thing. Some people are more experienced with their emotions or with this kind of thing than others. But you know, there have definitely been situations where I've been like, hey, so-and-so's getting kind of chummy, kind of handsy with your character. Are you okay with that? No. Cool. We're gonna make sure that doesn't happen, right? It is important that, yes, you have and defend your own boundaries, but check in on your other players. Check in if you're a GM. Tell people what their tools and their options are. This is also true in real life. Like, watch out for each other. Let's be good to each other. Please, the world is terrible enough outside of video games. You're making yourself vulnerable by playing these games to whatever degree. Again, horror games, far more vulnerable. I know lots of really attractive lady types and lady adjacents who are like, I want to play very sexy games with other ladies and lady adjacents. I want to do the smuttiest smut games ever with these people and only these specific people, because I know they'll keep me safe and we can have fun and have some character bleed and have some fun romancy times, and I won't be followed home that night.
Yep. Like they will
Hey,
go, hey, there's going to be some hand holding in this game. Oh, so much hand holding. And yeah, like if like your first responsibility is to protect yourself. And you know, you could find yourself in situations where like the GM didn't really define the terms of the game properly. Or and another great example of Bleed is something we've talked about on the channel before, of my familiar is my pet cat from when I was a kid. Maybe don't kill it. And that's something that, one, you as a player should communicate to your GM, and two, something that you as a GM should recognize. And ultimately, this is about communication. So first, making sure that you're on the same page for like what type of game you're running and what type of game you want to play. And second, making sure that you input boundaries and safety tools. No matter how innocent or innocuous your game may be, you are going to run into things that you didn't conceive of for one reason or another. You might set a game in the Old West, and all sorts of Old West things are great. But then when a lynch mob shows up, someone might have something to say about that.
Someone might have to unplug their internet to get out of the game.
Right. And like, one thing that I never considered before working with Kay is the entire monk class in D&D. Like, just how, like, the tropey, magical, Far East person, and how that has been pervasive in American media, especially when it's white guy playing old magical Chinese person. Like David Carradine, rest in something, because that whole, I'm not going to get into it on camera, but it's hilarious. But like that's and a lot of like theory crafting and a lot of conversations with Kay and with other people that I've known. Like, I've been up at 2:00 in the morning talking about how not to make the monk class problematic. Like, how I could play a monk and it would be cool and not really racist. And then I've had to like follow up and be like, hey, remember we had that, like, I know it was late at night and we were talking about, do you remember like a couple, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I'm like, okay, thank you. But if I didn't have an Asian person be like, yo, this is a problem. And ultimately, here's what's important. And, you know, we talk a lot about race. We talk a lot about women's issues. We talk about the alphabet family and the issues they face. You know what I did when an Asian person said to me, yo, the monk class is problematic, and here's why? I went, oh boy, gee willikers, the monk class is problematic, and here are all the reasons. I shut up, I listened, I took notes, and I accepted and internalized what they said. The thing I didn't do is A, ignore them, B, act like I didn't hear anything that they were saying, and C, argue with them about it.
Or Q, you're just so sensitive.
Right.
You're just too sensitive. Why do you got to make everything political? Why do you got to make everything about race?
You may not be into politics, but your landlord is. Mm-hmm. The corporations that govern your life, they're really into politics too. Mm-hmm. So you should probably at least pay attention a little bit. Yeah. Like if you like personal freedoms, if you like clean drinking water. I remember watching Captain Planet as a kid and being like, there's no way that someone just has a 55-gallon drum of toxic waste and then kicks it over into a river just because. Like, why did Dr. Blight do this? Because I'm evil. That's fiction. There's no. Everything I learn about corporations is like, you know, it'd probably be cheaper if we didn't like do this thing that damaged the environment. And they're like, yeah, but we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Like, lead in gasoline was making the entire population stupid. Was actively eroding the like top level IQ of the entire human race. And everybody involved was like, No, it's fine.
But bringing it back, this is why we do safety sessions. We do session zeros. We have safety tools. And again, the person you are today is not the person you're going to be in 2 years when you hit an important part of your campaign. It's also not the person you're going to be tomorrow. Because tomorrow you might find out about a health thing for you or your family, and you're suddenly like, cool, this whole thing is now off limits in my games because I am dealing with it IRL and I cannot deal with it in a fun way in fantasy. So as we've said, you can give consent, but giving consent means that consent can still be withdrawn at any time. If you thought, oh yeah, you know, like this happened to me, where I'm like, yeah, I think our character, yeah, we can have our characters, like we can see if they date. Yeah, that'd be cute. What if they kissed? Oh, I'm into it. And then like 2 sessions later, nope, never mind. That's not gonna happen. You got real weird as soon as I said yes. It's not happening anymore.
Yeah, so, true consent means being able to withdraw it at any point. Consent is not and never has been carte blanche to do whatever. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a situation where you cannot withdraw consent, then there is no consent.
Right. So we are nearing the end of our time here. Had a few people chime in, but yes, bleed, I would argue, not a mental health professional, I would argue bleed is something that happens to most people more often than they realize. Literally, if your character does something cool and you leave the table feeling happy because your character had a really good day, that's bleed. And that's the good kind of bleed. And that is a thing that you should enjoy and not aggressively try to remove from your gaming experience. Because we are all storytellers and we are all creatures influenced by story. And to try and remove that aspect from it is trying to remove something poor from the experience, I would argue. I just talked to another player, not describing his adopted son as the kid I bought to the kid I adopted, seeing as how I adopted my son and he was receptive and apologetic. Yes, like words matter, actions matter. Oh, I'm so glad you learned something, Eric. Yeah, this is a topic that again, I am a Bleed E player and I will walk away from things emotional. I have definitely like teared up during games on stream. I was playing in a game that's not aired yet with someone with a I haven't actually asked, but he definitely presents, I know he him pronouns, he definitely presents as straight. Has certainly I don't know if he goes any other way, but like presents as straight, very masculine, like great, awesome dude. Something terrible happened that was kind of caused by my character, and like he turned, like his character like recoiled into himself, and he turned, like his face turned red with emotion, right, as he's like, and his character went nonverbal, and he's just like, and I was like, my heart was, I was so afraid. And we got to a point and I'm like, yo, I am so sorry. He's like, no, it's great. Push all the buttons. I love it. Like came out of it like that. Was 100% feeling it in the moment and then went, nope, scene's done. We're moving on. I guarantee you he thought about that moment later that night. He looked like he was about to burst into tears. This very masculine dude. And I'm like, gosh, dang, I'm so lucky I get to play with really, really awesome people.
I have not watched a whole lot of Critical Role. But in what is it called? The series where Matt was the player and Abria was the GM.
Oh, Exandria Unlimited.
Yes. She's arguing with the Warlock as the Warlock's brother.
No,
and
twin sister.
Twin sister. No, but Abria, wasn't there a brother? Anyway, Abria is interacting with the player who's playing the warlock, and she's playing a character opposite of it. And Abria is in tears. Like, tears are streaming down her face while she's having this, like, really emotional moment with this character. And then the emotional moment gets over, and then Abria's back to being, like, a happy GM. And I'm like, yo. To go that deep and then to immediately come back out of it is an incredibly, like, rare and incredible feat. Like, just mind-boggling. But that's Bleed. Like, when you get so emotionally invested where you just start crying. And it's important to recognize that, like, that is a deep emotional, like, Bleed scenario that Abria knew she was about to get into and prepared herself for and compartmentalized. I was like, okay, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to do this thing as this performance, and then I'm going to get out. And, like, and like, there's good compartmentalization and bad compartmentalization. And the good kind, both. Right. And the good kind is when you, like, internalize and process those emotions that you feel. And just that example of that is something that, as I both play and as I build modules and as I GM, like, I keep that in mind, that not only is that possible, but there's a way to do that safely and responsible, and it's a way to add a lot of power to your performance and your experience. And so I want to make sure that, one, every table we have is a safe place to do that, and two, we build story elements whereby players can execute and experience those types of performances.
Now, caveat, again, Critical Role, I'm going to not move my hands so I don't implicate things, though I guess this is true of more than one character behind me. In one of the Critical Role campaigns, a player character died unexpectedly. Bad dice, everything went bad. That character died. Dead, dead, dead. Player said, I don't want you to resurrect this character. Character is dead and gone. But it was unexpected. Story elements were unresolved. No one was prepared for it that night, right? It wasn't like he came in, or the player came in going, this is what's going to happen tonight. It was a freak bad night accident. And they were discussing with the player after that, you know, what was it like that night and the day and the week after losing that character? And he said, they said, like, it happened. They got up, they left the table. And one of the femmes who works for Critical Role was apparently sobbing on their shoulder, like had been watching it in the green room and was just losing all of her feels and all of her love for this character that she was so committed to, was crying on the shoulder of the player who had just lost that character, right? And the player is comforting her. And then the player said they went home, curled up on the couch, and cried for 8 hours. Like, cried, would wake up crying, would go back to sleep, would wake up crying, like, absolutely delayed reaction. And then came back the next week with a whole new character, ready to go. Again, telling everyone, like, told Matt Mercer, if they try to resurrect my old character, send them to this character who can tell them that it cannot happen, cannot be done, that character is gone. That is specifically what the player wanted. That is some incredible bleed and some incredible compartmentalizing, and you do not have to do that to be a good TTRPG player. That is some incredible delves into emotion. It is exhausting. It is exhausting to compartmentalize like that. It is exhausting and takes a lot of work to know yourself, to recognize your emotions, to be able to rein it in. You do not have to do that to be a good or successful TTRPG player. Being able to access your emotions, to give a good performance, to understand where a character is coming from is very important. You do not have to do it to that level. Don't try to do that. When they say, if you want to play for bleed, this is how you do it. Do not immediately try to go full critical role. It will not feel good for you or for anyone else.
Yeah, and also recognize you could just sit at a table and play, and then let that be that.
And you can say, you know what? I really want to do this scene really, really well. I can't do it tonight. Can we circle back to it later? Can something happen? Because I will not give my best tonight. Or I, the player, am not up to dealing with these emotions. All of this is fair and valid. Take care of yourself first. And figure out how to... Again, David and I, we do chats with our players after our sessions. I will often, especially if I felt like I said no to a player a lot, or if I threw something really challenging at them, I will message them privately after and be like, hey, are you okay? Hey, I'm sorry, I blah, 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 blah. Check-ins are important. Aftercare is important. And if no one is doing that for you, make sure you do it for yourself. And maybe, if you see an opportunity to check in on other players who maybe had a rough night, maybe that'll start becoming a cycle and you all can take care of each other. Because having someone check in on you or chat with you about how cool the session was after a game feels really good. Regardless of bleed, emotional aftercare, whatever, that just feels good.
Emotional aftercare, very important. And like, we didn't go too deep into it, but we've done a deep dive into safety tools and setting expectations and setting boundaries in your games before, both like as a player and as a GM. And it's important to do all those things. And if you're a player and you rock up to a table and those things aren't explained or aren't in place, then it's and you want those things, then speak up.
I would say if those aren't there, request them, because even for, again, I've known people who signed up for a fun, silly, light, a fun romp in the Old West, and then a literal lynch mob showed up, and people had opinions about that. And this person had specifically asked, "Can I have safety? Are there safety tools?" And they said, "Don't worry about it."
You can't say don't worry about it.
Exactly.
And
we did safety tool. We went over safety tools when we played My Little Pony.
Yeah. And that was and is very important.
And yes, Rex says there are many other schools of acting that are less involved emotionally. So yes, you do not have to do that. If that kind of thing brings you joy, know your boundaries, take care of yourself after, but you do not have to do it.
Yeah, and like, both sides of the spectrum are equally valid. There's the, hey, here's my backstory, including my parents. Tell me how you killed them. And then there's also the, this is my kitty Fluffy. If anything happens to Fluffy, everyone gets the smoke. And both are great ways to play.
Yes. And different games you might do different things in different games, and all of that is fine.
Acting is emotional stunt work, and just like physical stunt work, safety meetings are important. That is the best thing I have heard all day.
That is wonderful. And yes, Moxie, 2 to 3 safety tools in place. Always great. With your check-in, do it. Take care of each other. So I think that's probably going to bring us to the end of our stream here. Thank you all for joining us. Eric, I'm so glad you joined us and that you learned a little bit about bleed. Again, I was surprised when I was reading through the comments, because I waded into the comments because I just don't like myself sometimes. When I was digging into the comments and people were like, I didn't know what this thing was. I didn't know why I was feeling this way. It's really nice to know that it's normal, that other people experience this. So again, there are lots of safety tools. There are lots of reasons to do this or to not do this. And if at any point you feel unsafe, either find someone in the game that you trust that you can talk to, ideally your GM, but that's not always the option, or just back out. It might cost an action. I absolutely took this from Rex. It might take an action in a TTRPG, but disengaging is a free action IRL. If you need to disengage from a game, be it streamed or home, do it. Take care of yourself first. That is what's most important. So, David, who the heck is you and what the heck has you been doing here?
Hi, I'm David, also known as Full Rubber Ducky, and this is the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show, where every week we talk about TTRPG stuff, how to be a better player, how to be a better GM, how to be a better person, all with a focus on intersectionality and inclusion so that everybody can have a good time.
And I'm Kay. I'm your other co-host. You find us here every Tuesday doing this thing, covering various topics, and we're going to start hunting for guests in 2024. We're almost there, y'all. That's terrifying. Wednesday, I will be at Goblin Cave TV playing the My Little Pony Tiefling in the circus game. Thursday, I am streaming Coral Island, which is a brand new, just out today, 3D Stardew Valley. It's available on Game Pass. And so many other things. Yes, there's so much to do. David will be streaming Disco Elysium on Friday. Sunday, I will be at Tavernos channel playing Girl by Moonlight, which is a magical girl TTRPG. If you are going to PAX Unplugged, David and I, as well as I believe Moxie and Rex, will be at PAX Unplugged. I'm going to be on 2 panels, one on Friday at 7:30, I believe, and one Saturday at 8:30. I might have gotten the 7:30 the days mixed up, but evening panels for me. Also, save the date, December 17th. That is a Sunday. David is not going to PAX. I wish David was going to PAX.
Nope. But hopefully next year when David has more disposable income.
One of them will be streamed. The Friday one is going to be in Mothman, and it is tarot and TTRPGs. So we will be talking tarot cards and reading and incorporating them into games in various ways, games that have already incorporated them, or how to hack the astrology feat in Pathfinder 2e to make it a perfectly legit and creepily accurate TTRPG, tarot card pull. Horrifying. But yes, December 17th, save the date. We're going to have a good time. And if those of you who've been here for the past 3 years, you know what we do every December.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Good time.
And the big bad is excellent. That's all I'll say. We almost changed last year's big bad to be this year's big bad.
Yeah.
Someone dropped the name last year, and I'm like...
Yeah, we were so close to that hard right turn of like, everything we had, throw it away. We're doing this.
It was so close. It was so close. And the sad part is, it still would have worked this year. Like last year's would have worked this year. But
absolutely, we
all thought that ship was going down a lot faster than it is. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it really is more of a slow sink. Mm-hmm. But it is definitely still falling apart in real time.
Who are we going to raid tonight, David?
That is a good question. Let's see. Chelsea Bites is playing Jet Set Radio. Oh.
Let's go see Chelsea.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts. It is always a treat to see you. We will again be here next Tuesday. We will see you then, if not before. Thank you so much again for hanging with us. Be kind to yourself, be excellent to others, and we will see you next time.